it seems to be that oncology would still hold a lot of excitement and opportunities for young trainees. And I hope that ultimately, whatever we're doing is going to serve patients. Being exposed to these great thinkers and people who are so accomplished and know how to identify and solve very, very important problems really shaped me.
Hi everyone, welcome to OncoDaily, and today on OncoInfluencers we have Professor Hagop Youssoufian. He's world known in the medical oncology field and is in the field for several decades, including the biotech and industry. And today we're going to touch different topics. Thank you very much, Professor Youssoufian, for having the time for us.
Yeah, my great pleasure. It's very nice to see you again.
Starting from the beginning, why did you decide to become a physician, first of all?
Well, I think even now it seems to be the right decision, but it wasn't always that way. So I toyed around with the idea of maybe becoming a violinist at one point. Shockingly, I wasn't that good at it, so that was an easy decision. Triage, pilot, and I can go on and on. But I think the major driver was not only the science, but being exposed to role models, including one particular family member, my cousin actually, who is very well known in a different field of medicine that I'm in now, and also the realization that what we were witnessing from a scientific perspective was maybe the tip of an iceberg that was about to emerge. And last and probably most importantly, the opportunity to do something directly impacting patients' lives. So all of those components played into a decision to take that plunge.
Thank you. And I mean, you studied at the top universities, including your undergrads and postgraduates, some Ivy League degrees you have. So, I mean, how it happened? Please, can you explore more?
In any way unique in that regard. I think it's not so much the top university thing that, in my opinion, is the be all and end all. But whatever opportunity presents to someone, how do you maximize it really? But in my case, I was fortunate enough to get accepted to a medical school, for example, University of Massachusetts Medical School, that was not that well known at that time. And since then, it's become a powerhouse of research, especially in the RNA field. 2 Nobel Prize winners, so amazing place. Also, Boston area, which my family settled after we immigrated from Syria, is a hotbed of universities, very well-known ones. So I just tried to take advantage of our local environment, go to lectures, try to expose myself in a broad sense to what was going on. And by hook or crook, I was, able to go to these good schools, be exposed to some terrific mentors, and basically one thing led to another. Once in a while, someone might identify you as perhaps, showing promise and may take an interest in you. That did happen to me also, when I was very grateful for it. And so, again, there's not a simple answer. I was not necessarily the person who tested the best on standardized tests or anything like that, or wrote the most compelling essay. But there were opportunities, and I suppose I was somewhat successful in taking advantage of them.
And then why oncology?
Well, that was also not very straightforward, to be quite honest, because my first choice was medical genetics, and in fact, I did become board certified in medical genetics. That was at Johns Hopkins. Some of groundbreaking work in collating information and even later on, doing much more with mutation analysis in all kinds of directions was being done at Hopkins. So that was my first love and continues to be actually. But then just as I was doing that, there were so many new discoveries in the field of hematology. The organization of the globin genes. I mean, this is taking me back now so many decades. I have to jog my memory a little bit. So I was fascinated by that work, and I also realized that there's a part of medical genetics that was missing in what I was doing, which was mostly characterizing the pathogenesis of some inherited diseases that weren't really well understood. I already felt that that was a contribution, but I didn't want to stop at the characterization step. So the next step would be, what do you do about it? Counseling, which we were doing, but even more importantly, from a therapeutic sense, that was somewhat lacking in genetics at that point. So that led me to hematology oncology and also the return to the Boston area, which is where I'm based. And then, the discoveries and the pace of knowledge has been exponential, as you know so well. There's no end in sight, thankfully, for patients. So I eventually landed on medical oncology because the unmet need was, to me, so much greater than perhaps in other areas, and also the opportunity to learn in fundamental ways about disease pathogenesis and then design treatments that are relevant was probably unmatched. I mean, I can give you so many examples, but maybe one thing to touch on, which has been sort of a consistent theme in some of the rest of my career, was the story of KRAS. Initially in colon cancer, where Bert Vogelstein, who is at Johns Hopkins, was the first to characterize the pathogenesis from the earliest stages of the precancerous state to what happens in metastasis. And there was a sequence that is very, very well known to every oncologist. And somewhere along the line, KRAS mutations apply. And eventually, as we learn more and more about that pathway, it turns out that there's a relationship to growth factor receptors, specifically EGFR, that eventually led me into understanding the opportunities there. Even more, I joined a company that was developing an antibody in that state. So apologies for the little bit of a going down the memory lane, but it was those
No, please
areas
go.
that
It's very
yeah.
interesting.
It was really one of several experiences, but probably the one that I'm also most proud of, that led to a critical change in the approach to therapy, and also convincing the regulators, the FDA, the EMA, that there should be a modification in how the drug is being marketed. So again, the world has not stopped there at all. In fact, now we have approved KRAS inhibitors in lung cancer, and probably many more indications to follow. So I go back again to that tip of the iceberg comment that I made earlier. It seems to be that oncology would still hold a lot of excitement and opportunities for young trainees, and I hope that ultimately whatever we're doing is going to serve patients. I mean, that's our goal as physicians, as oncologists, or any other branch of medicine. I'm happy that I made that choice, and specifically in medical oncology, where the unmet need remains to be so critical in so many different branches of medical oncology. There's still, quite a few ways of making contributions.
Can you explore a bit more your career? How, I mean, from where did you go? Who were your mentors? What impact did they have on you? And all this, like the stairs. It's a long way, I know, but it's, I'm sure, very educational and motivational for the people.
Well, I appreciate it. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of that. So I did a pretty conventional, 4 years of undergraduate education followed by medical school, which is conventional in America. Went to Boston College, then University of Massachusetts Medical School, and I knew that I wanted to become an academic. So I actually was the very first ND PhD student at UMass Medical School. It took some time off between my second and third years to do it, but then got a little bit of cold feet. I wasn't really sure that I was suited for it, and decided that if I wanted to pursue a medical academic career, I could do it later. So I continued with my medical school studies. Then for internship and residency, I was in two places, Cleveland Clinic for 2 years, then Johns Hopkins for 2 additional years. It I did what I would call an atypical internal medicine residency. There was something called short track at that time, where the typical 3 years of residency could be shortened by beginning a fellowship in the third year. And so that's what happened. And now I'm going to switch gears a little bit to one of my mentors who was just so influential. And, I'm just so grateful for him to give me the opportunity. And he was actually of Armenian descent, very famous professor at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Hagop Youssoufian, a very, very well-known geneticist. He passed away a few years ago. He and Viktor McKusick, who was the chairman of medicine and probably the god of medical genetics, recruited me for my third year of medical residency to Johns Hopkins, only because I had spent a few months as a medical student there, and I guess I made an impression. We made some observations in the hematology arena and mutation characterization that was published in Nature. So they knew me a little bit, and that strengthened my conviction that probably this path that I chose, not to necessarily get a PhD, but to supplement it with additional postdoctoral training and then work my way into an academic position, was not a bad thing. And so after completing my residency, I essentially rolled that into a medical genetics fellowship and continued my work with Dr. Kazasian. Very, very fortunate to have discovered distinct mechanism of mutation. Also turns out to be in hemophilia, so it's not in medical oncology. And that had to do with repetitive elements, in this case, line 1, that keep jumping around in our genomes. And in that case, it jumped right into the factor VIII gene and caused mutations. So that was actually reminiscent of what somebody named Barbara McClintock won the Nobel Prize for many years before in MACE. So that was really, really exciting moment when I saw the autoradiograph for the first time. That's what we were doing way back when there was no NGS, nothing like that. It was just an amazing moment in my personal life. I had to call my mentor at midnight and wake him up, like, this is what we have. And so that was also very nice because it was published in Nature. Actually, Dr. Kazasian wrote a book afterwards reminiscing, all of that, including a little part of a chapter mentioning me personally. So I was very grateful about that as well. Then, as I indicated before in talking about, big high-powered places, my hometown being Boston, I figured, okay, so hematology is great, medical genetics is great, but I really want to do something that is more therapeutically relevant and maybe more cancer-oriented. Came to Mass General, where I did a medical oncology fellowship. Again, so many fantastic mentors. I can't even, mention even just a few of them. Followed by additional research training at MIT at Whitehead Institute with another incredible mentor, Harvey Lodish, who's probably one of the top very few cell biologists in the world. His lab, came with several Nobel Prize winners. I mean, it was that kind of a high-powered environment. Now I was nowhere near by quality with those guys, but just being in that environment was incredible. So even if they were not direct mentors, just being exposed, part of that, premier research institution was something that I highly valued. And I go even a step further. I mean, even the other PIs in the institute, people like David Baltimore or Jerry Fink. I mean, I had no direct interactions with them. They were not my mentors in a formal sense, but being exposed to these great thinkers and people who are so accomplished and know how to identify and solve very, very important problems really shaped me. So I guess that's one value of being in a high-powered center. But as to how I got there, it was incremental. It was building on, a little bit of success here, publishing something there, getting some recognition in that sense. And that's probably where my formal training as an academic ended. After that, it was the next phase of, getting an academic position and returning the favor, mentoring others.
What was the most challenging decision for you during your career?
The most challenging decision, um, well, probably the mindset that I had before was that I am now an academic physician, and this is it. I mean, this is the die is cast, and this is where I'm going to stay. Difficult decision was to make the transition to industry. That happened roughly around 25 years ago. It was difficult because I had a well-funded lab. I was enjoying the limited clinical activity that I was in. I had administrative responsibilities, which I didn't enjoy very much, but you do what you have to do. And I was also the director of a postgraduate program and had the opportunity to interact with a lot of really outstanding fellows and mentor residents. So I was doing the full spectrum of academic physician. There's a term called triple threat. Seeing patients, being administrator, running a lab, etc. And threat because supposedly you're a master of none. But in my case, it was the right mix, and to decide that perhaps there's something more I can do with the rest of my career was a very difficult decision. Having taken the plunge again, I'm glad I did, because that next phase also held a lot of incredible opportunities, being witness to a lot of innovations and some surprises. So that's kind of how it went for me.
Moving forward about the industry, can you please explore more about like how this transition was? Where did you go? What did you do? And you were building also a lot of biotechs, and you have had major roles in the industry at different times of your career. So if someone is interested, like pursuing a career in industry, I think it would be very educational.
You have to have the interest, of course. It's really important to also bring people along with whatever decision you're making, in my opinion, and having a supportive family is right up there in terms of the must-haves. The idea that industry is kind of a monolithic thing, I don't think that's true. I mean, there's just as in tumors, there's a lot of heterogeneity. So my very first position was at Bristol Myers Squibb, big pharma, very reputable. Even in the cancer field, there were powerhouses. Taxol was developed there, and subsequently so many other drugs. How I ended up there is a longer story, but there was a position that they sort of created uh, as head of experimental medicine, which actually was left up to me to define what that was. And I tried to do it, which was more biomarker oriented, trying to do proof of concept studies that were quicker. The big thing in industry is that there are so many drugs, you don't know which one's going to succeed, but maybe more importantly, you don't know which one's going to fail. And if you knew a little bit more about which one's going to fail, you try to get that answer quicker. And so that was one of the motivations through coupling science, understanding pathways. Collaboration was a big, big thing. And one of the surprises was that even in a well-oiled machine like a big pharma, there tend to be some silos. So people in different therapeutic areas, for example, in hepatology research or in neuroscience, don't really know what's going on the oncology side. And it may very well be that if they were simply talking to each other, they might discover some commonalities and maybe some tools that could be cross-purposed. So that was my entry point. At the same time, there is the traditional pathway of drug development. So I was also the leader on one of those programs, and we had a small portfolio of signal transduction inhibitors, several of which failed, but one did succeed. It's called the dasatinib. It's still a very useful drug in CML and in your area as well. So that was one of my projects that ultimately became a success story. Subsequently, I spent a few years at Aventis, which became Sanofi Aventis, and now it's just Sanofi. So that company went through several transitions as well. I worked, by contrast to what I was doing at BMS, I worked on an established program, and that was the development of docetaxel or Taxotere in one specific indication, adjuvant treatment of breast cancer, early breast cancer. That was also incredible because it led to global approval of that indication. It's not used as much these days because there's been a lot more innovation in that area, but it taught me a great deal about, how uh, systematic we need to be to develop drugs. Probably the highlight of my career in industry so far has been the few years that I spent at ImClone. ImClone, by contrast, it was not big pharma, is not even a company now. It was eventually acquired by Eli Lilly. But I eventually became chief medical officer there and was running the entirety of the oncology portfolio, much of which focused on anti-angiogenic agents, on growth factor receptor directed agents, and the point that I made before about KRAS and that Bert Vogelstein story. So ImClone is best known for developing cetuximab or Erbitux that had a interesting, let's say, if not a little bit of a convoluted history. I missed part of that. I came a little bit later. It was also personally, not a static program, very, very dynamic. We got multiple approvals and different indications in colon cancer and head and neck cancer. But at the same time, there was a whole other part of the pipeline that was not going as fast. I wouldn't call it languishing, but there was a lot more promise in that pipeline that with more focused attention, uh, it was bound to be much more interesting and productive. And so that's what I did. We got multiple approvals out of other indications, and eventually Eli Lilly saw the promise in what we were doing and acquired us. I stayed on for about a year and a half of that transition, and then made the decision that as pleased and as grateful as I was for the re-experience in big pharma, that probably my personality is more suited to smaller companies, and this may be, important for your listeners. And that, again, there's not just one model in industry. And you have to kind of feel your way around to see where you can be most effective. I work with several small companies. Some were acquired, some because of financial reasons, decided to close shop essentially. And for the past 8 years or so, I've become an independent consultant, meaning that um, I don't work full time for any single company, but rather divide my effort across several companies. And what I try to do is to not be excessive about the number of companies and try to limit it to, the usual 5 or 6 days a week in terms of time commitment. So work with maybe 2 or 3 companies more intensively and a number of others less intensively as, a member of a clinical advisory board or scientific advisory board. So that's my daytime job, if you will. I did start a couple of companies as the founder. The one that is, I hope, will yield some fruit is a company called Solid Therapeutics. I started that with some academic friends of mine, and it's actually based in Copenhagen. It's in the tumor metabolism field, which is pretty challenging. A lot of redundancies, and a lot of ways to feed tumors and deny nutrients from the immune cells that you want. You want those to be the first to take advantage of the nutrients. So there are some pretty interesting strategies out there, but that's the one startup that I'm involved with. I'm excited about it, but time will tell. And maybe last but not least, I'm also an adjunct professor at Brown University, and the range of responsibilities there are pretty narrow. Basically, mentoring fellows, occasionally giving lectures, but also introducing companies to Brown and to my colleagues there as opportunities for clinical trial sites and other things that they might wish to collaborate about. So it's sort of a win-win in that sense, being having one foot in industry, one foot in academia, and also trying to broker these marriages. So that's a nice feeling.
Very nice. What would be your advice for the younger generation to succeed?
You are right that now there is a much younger generation than me. So I mean,
Well, I think always there is a younger one.
that is very true. I don't know. I mean, this may be too high a level, but I would say don't give up. Don't give up on your dreams. Um, and try to stay current with what's going on. I can't pretend that I'm even in that position of giving advice. But if you have the opportunity to identify mentors, whether those could be family members, from a professional standpoint, if there are mentors that believe are going to expose you to opportunities, and of course, you also need to make sure that you're contributing to their success too. Identifying the right mentor, I think, is incredibly important. But basically, take some time to continue to educate yourself, have that mental discipline to learn about new areas, not sort of be so, laser focused on just one thing. Now, that's my personal advice. Somebody else who has been laser focused on one area may tell you something very different, and I totally respect that. Point that you brought up earlier about being in premier universities and institutions, that's probably important, but there are also some misconceptions about that. I think you can do great work in many other places too that may not have the same kind of recognition. But the number one advice that I give to my children too is to not give up on their dreams.
Thank you so much. Just like last two questions. What do you see where OncoDaily and similar like platforms which are leading the oncology media could be helpful to shape the current oncology situations in the United States and globally, and also what else like we can do to make the things better, in your opinion?
There are a number of different medical education forums which didn't exist when I was in training. Um, but now there's a reason to ask that question in a serious way because, you want to differentiate yourself. I don't think it's difficult. In fact, I think it's a welcome opportunity. I mean, there were so many major movers at ASCO, for example, that you may see in other forums covered specifically for this trial or, that indication. Uh, but just dissemination of knowledge or reinforcement of, what's happening in the breast cancer field, Destiny Breast 09, or whatever it is that is going to shape the future care of breast cancer. And breast cancer is just one example. I mean, head and neck cancer, you name it. I mean, there were a number of major movers would benefit from reinforcement, even though it's covered in other forms too. So what I'm trying to say is that you don't necessarily need to do something that is completely unique, but the part of the value generation is to underscore those big achievements and talk to the right people. The other part of what OncoDaily could do is to build on several of your questions around leadership and how somebody might get from point A to point B, which may not be that visible. So I think that's also very useful for people to have some concrete models as to how certain things can be possible.
Thank you so much. And the last question, which usually I ask, who would you recommend to interview next?
I think you've already interviewed some really fantastic people. I think it's the kinds of leaders like the ASCO leaders, but also from the European side too. What would be important to pull in?
If you think about one person.
Yeah, it's probably unfair, but maybe I'll come back to you about that one. But it's just a quick look at the ASCO leadership, I think would give you a lot of clues.
Thank you so much, Professor Youssoufian. Thanks for having your time. Thanks a lot. It was really a pleasure.
Well, my pleasure as well. Thank you.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to OncoDaily on YouTube. Hit the bell icon to stay updated.